How is everybody? Good. Hanging in there. Anyone else like 4 or 5 pounds heavier? Right. I had a good eating week last week. We were talking about cake. Did I close it already? Let's see. I did. Oh, I had a piece of cake up already. It's never too early to be talking about cake. But we're really down to the end of the semester at this point. It's crazy. And I'm sorry, my voice sounds awful. Like the wind last week just wreaked havoc on my sinuses. So I'm not sick, but I've had that like dry cough and like my nose has been annoying. So forgive me if I cough. It's like it's nothing like other than sinuses. But we have just a few classes left. We have today and Thursday, and then Tuesday and Thursday. So we have this week and next week, and then we're done, which is kind of sad. Honestly, I get sad at the end of the semester. So I'm bummed that we're almost there, but it's exciting for winter break. So I want to talk about those two things, but I'm going to hold off maybe to the end, just since we'll see if anyone else shows up, just so I don't have to repeat it. But what I want to do today is we're going to talk about those two things. We're going to talk about the movie and kind of wrap up chapter 14. And then we'll start chapter 15 on aging. And then after that, in our next 2 classes, we have the last chapter on forensic psych. So that's kind of all we have left at this point. So what I want to do first is talk about chapter 14 and the movie that we spent a couple of days watching. So if you could pull out your movie worksheet, right, that you hopefully brought with you or have on your computer or whatever. But pull that out, and we're going to talk about Arnie a little bit as it relates to chapter 14. And then I'll collect that when we're done. I'll give you just a second to grab that. And I hope you enjoyed watching the movie. I know it's an older movie at this point. It's almost like 30 years old at this point, which is crazy to think. But I think it's such a great example of somebody struggling with a developmental disorder. And I don't think that his disorder is perfectly clear, which I think gives a great opportunity for discussion. So what I want to do, I want to get a list going of some of the things that we think is going on with Arnie. So I'll make a list up here on the board. What are some of the things that you wrote down for number 2? Anyone want to give me one? Let's get like a running list going. What are some of the things that you noticed are kind of different or deficits that Arnie is experiencing? Anyone have one? Yeah.
Situations like laughing when people are sad.
Okay. So trying to think how to send that up. So kind of acting inappropriately. And then you kind of talk about emotions, right? Like his emotions aren't always appropriate for the situation. Yeah. How do you mean? Give me a little more.
Like, was an example of the movie because like interested in driving or something?
Mm-hmm. So kind of obsessing over little things, maybe? Okay. So we could say like obsessing things. Okay, other stuff. Yeah, he does a lot of repeating. Right, he repeats words, he repeats phrases, things that people say, he then mimics them back. What else? Should be a bunch more we can add. Yeah.
It's kind of along the lines of that.
Yeah, he has four social cues. Yeah, he doesn't really pick them up as well as you would expect for someone of his age. What else? Yeah. Yeah.
So power like every few days kind of thing. There's laws like I don't think that bad, but finding the tree. Like,
Right.
If you fell out like that.
Yeah, that could be dangerous. So consequences or danger. Yeah, and he keeps doing those, which could almost be some of the repeating as well. Like he has that repeating of those behaviors. What are some other things we could add? I think we could easily add some more stuff. What else do you have written down? Yeah.
This is sort of like this is because you can practically like
Okay.
start thing it's like I think it was when he went into like the girls mom's house where where messing around with it, it's like count belongs on the record.
Mhm.
It's like,
1, 2, 4, 9. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay, perfect. Right. What else can we put up here? What else did you write down? I have at least like a few more things. So look at your list. Yeah.
The same.
Yeah,
There's time to.
sure. But like he can't take care of himself, maybe, or yeah. I think so. We can write the bathtub. I think that's a great example. Ready to know to get out of the bathtub, something that, seems like pretty common sense to do. Like when you're done, you get out, right? Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Right, he purposefully killed it and then cried over it, right? Like not understanding or like kind of putting together that that's what he had done. Yeah. Yeah, right. You're hiding, huh? Right. Like we're just again that not quite comprehending that. Anything else that we can add if you look at your list? Anyone have anything different? Yeah.
you got the groceries for.
Becky.
There,
Mhm.
yeah, keep on them. Either we should say it's in order, yes.
Okay, let's add that. A big one for me that I would add is he doesn't act his age. Or that's one to me, like he's 17, about to be 18. He acts like he's much, much younger. Really needing to be cared for quite a bit. Yeah. Right. Yeah, he does need to be watched all the time. So he can't care for himself. Needs to be watched. And cared for by other people. Anything else is a pretty good list, but anybody have anything else? Yeah. Sure. You're not invited, right? I love that, right? Okay, so and I kind of think that goes here, but
It's hard for me to read, so. okay.
wait, and honesty, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm writing them quickly. Aren't you glad that you have PowerPoint slides instead of having to read just my handwriting? Yeah, that doesn't help either, and the light doesn't help. Good excuses, I like it. Right. Anything else? I think those are a lot of the things that I have. I'm trying to see if there's anything else I wrote down. Anybody have anything else we want to add? It's a good list, but just to make sure. Okay, so let's think about what for number 3, if you flip to the next page. What are some of the disorders that you came up with? So don't like support it or justify it, but let's just get a list. What are some of the disorders that you think he might have? Anyone have one that you're thinking? Yeah. Okay, so ASD, autistic spectrum disorder. Anything else? There's a couple other ones I think we could put up here. Yeah,
Intellectual.
right. Let's see how many abbreviations we can get, right? ASD, IDD. Do we want to add ADHD? Right. You just keep it going. Anything else that we want to add here? Did anyone have anything different? Those are definitely the 2 big ones. Okay. All right. So let's talk about these 2 a little bit more, right? Those are the 2 big ones that they talk about. Let's start with autistic spectrum disorder. And when we say autistic spectrum disorder, this is autism, right? But it exists on a spectrum, which is why they named it ASD. And it can go from really mild to really profound. How many of you thought that maybe autistic spectrum disorder fits Arnie? Maybe not perfectly, but pretty well it fits him. Okay. A lot of you, so why autistic spectrum disorder? Anyone want to support that? Yeah. 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 Okay, right. I like that, the kind of the communication stuff, the social cues and things. What else? A lot of you said this one. What else kind of tipped you in this direction? Yeah. Okay. So the lack of fear that he has, some of that hyperactivity kind of stuff. He definitely has the repetitive element, right? Yeah. Yeah, right. He does a lot of those kind of repetitive motor movements, the repetitive counting, those kind of things. He definitely has some elements of autistic spectrum disorder. Now, in my opinion, they kind of blend a couple of disorders together in this movie, which is pretty common with movies. They tend to do that. But there's a couple of things here that aren't characteristic of autism with Arnie, right? Typically, people who have autistic spectrum disorder, and again, it's a spectrum, so this can go from very mild to very severe, they tend to have a lack of responsiveness. Now, Arnie is actually quite responsive to the environment, right? It's just not always appropriate, right? So he's responding. He's also very physically affectionate, which doesn't tend to be typical of autism. Like he hugs Becky, he hugs Gilbert. Those are things that you don't always tend to see. So he's super responsive. It's just not always appropriate to the situation. Lack of responsiveness. Yeah, it's kind of confusing, right? So typically someone who is unresponsive, they're almost like shut off to the world around them. So if somebody is upset, they won't notice it. If things are going on around them, they might be oblivious to them. They're not typically communicating a whole lot or responding to people around them. So he is responding and interacting. It's just not always appropriate to the situation. Does that help a little bit? Yeah.
Is that
Usually it's pretty consistent and it can be quite profound to the point where people don't have any awareness or responsiveness to people around them at all, or it can be kind of slight. And so I don't quite think that he has that. He can speak pretty well, right? Sometimes people with autistic spectrum disorder don't have much language, like very limited words, very limited communication ability. He actually can communicate pretty decently, again, just not quite at an age appropriate level. He definitely has the repetitive kind of behavior, right? Between climbing the water tower, the counting, the motor movements. A lot of those things are typical, but he has a few things that don't quite fit. And so I think that's where this other piece comes in. How many of you thought that maybe IDD might fit him in some capacity? Maybe not all the way, but part way. Several of you, any thoughts here as to why? Yeah, did you, why'd you think?
But,
Oh, no worries.
just like, I feel like it's kind of, it's a moderate and severe situation, because like I said, they can learn to take care of themselves to the extent they can learn to,
Yeah.
in like a certain vocation, if it's, simple enough, they can, deal with that, and that's what Arnie does at the grocery store. And then also being constant supervision.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing, and maybe Gilbert can't step away from like 30 seconds without,
That I'm taking out to climb the
Yeah.
water tower again.
Yeah. So
I love that. I'll never go up there again, but then he wants to go back up
Yeah,
there, right? Yeah. And I think for me, if I had to put my money somewhere, I would put here. But I think if you made a case for either, you're in a good spot. The reason I would pick this is one of the kind of defining features is this person doesn't act their age, right? So Arnie, most of the movie is 17, about to be 18. His behavior and the things that he says reminds me of like a 4 to 5 year old for the most part. But my twins are 8 and they are more capable than Arnie at 17, 18, right? Like if I put my kids in the bathtub, they know to wash themselves and get out, right? Versus he stays in there. Some of the things that he says and does remind me of when they were like 4 or 5, that poor understanding of death and the understanding of like the permanence of the loss of death usually starts around the age of 7 to 8, right? So around 7 or 8 years old, people start to understand, though, like they're gone. Right? When my daughter was 4, one of our cats passed away, and she was like, "Oh no, where's Orca?" And we're like, "Oh, she died, sweetheart." She's like, "Oh, she's at Target." She's at Target, right? And I'm like, "Why is she at Target?" She's like, "Well, that's where they go when they leave. They go to Target." I was like, "Oh, that'd be a great heaven. If it has a Starbucks, I'd be fine with that," right? But she thought our cat was at Target for like 3 years, right? She didn't get that yet at 4, right? We still joke about that. Whenever like someone is missing, we're like, "Oh, they must be at Target," right? But this usually doesn't come until about 7 or 8. And Arnie doesn't have that yet, which you can see his mental state is kind of younger than that he can't care for himself. Poor understanding of consequences. Those are things that are typical of someone who's younger. The social cues and the blatant honesty could fit a little bit in both. It's kind of that lack of a filter a little bit there. But if I had to guess, I would say this one. But I do think that they kind of blend them a little bit. There's also some ADHD like elements in there with this hyperactivity and impulsivity. And that reminded me of something. I wanted to mention this just in case I do ask it of you. How many of you have heard of Asperger's before as a disorder? A lot of you. Asperger's used to be its own separate disorder. And typically what it looked like was somebody who was very smart, very intelligent, but they have really bad social cues. So they don't know when to stop talking, or they don't know how to interact with people appropriately. That disorder has actually been absorbed into the spectrum. So it's no longer its own distinct disorder. Now it's part of autistic spectrum disorder. So if I were to ask like a true false question of you on the final exam, that Asperger's is its own disorder, it is no longer, it is part of this. They cover it in the book, but I just wanted to mention that so that you had that in your mind if I do ask that. So, let's look at number 4 for a minute here. What are some things that might be contributing? And you can kind of speculate a little bit, but what do you think are some like causes or contributing factors to what's going on with Arnie? Yeah.
Contribution.
Sure.
We don't see his father, so we can't like assume on that part, but it really does like show some of the disability.
Yeah.
He's like not very present in a lot of conversations. Like when he'll be talking to his friends, he'll be like pouring out sugar, like just on his way to the distance and stuff like that. Yeah.
So maybe some kind of genetic, like inherited tendency, something biological. Okay, great. What else do you think might be contributing? Maybe it's not the whole picture, but what are some factors that might be adding? Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So say more, but yeah. Yeah. Ellen or yeah, Ellen. Yeah.
Ellen. It's kind of a typical teenager.
Mhm.
I imagine that's a little younger than our age. Less respect for people with developmental disorders. Don't understand that.
Sure.
Don't care for much. Have a lot of patience. She definitely doesn't have patience for Arnie
Right.
at all. It's good for that. So Arnie's family, so Gilbert can be rough.
Yeah.
He's there in motivation for his behavior, which he doesn't have that much control over it. So
Yeah.
just for the circumstances. So
Yeah, I definitely think his family plays a really big role in what's going on with him. Maybe it's not the cause, but it's definitely contributing, those family dynamics. There's not any kind of like structure or consistency in the family at all. Like those things might not have caused it, but they're definitely not helping. Yeah. Sure.
I don't feel like any one of the members of, any of the kids at least, except for, as their own sense of individuality. I'm gonna have a family day, then they have to do this, especially when I'm always like a little building.
Right. Yeah. It never goes out. Right. They're very enmeshed, right? They are. I think that's a big way. They're very dependent on each other, very enmeshed with each other. I think that might be adding. Did you have a thought too?
I was also wondering, did he ever said that if we had services provided with kids?
Right.
They ever advocated for them to get them?
Yeah, we don't have any information about that, do we? Yeah, right. And we can talk about that a little bit more in the next one too, right? Of things that might help him to get better. Anyone else have any other thoughts about contributing factors? Like, I always wonder if there's maybe some kind of injury that happened, right? He climbs the trees all the time. Did he climb and fall when he was younger? I could speculate a little bit about that, or something prenatally, like when he was, his mom was pregnant with him. Also, I don't know if you picked up on it, but the dad committed suicide, right? They kind of are a little cryptic about it, but he hung himself in the basement. And so, you know, maybe there was something like within the family, there was something already there, like emotionally, that like there's some, you know, vulnerability. Also the small town. He's living in a really small town. I don't think that's helping him, right? There's not a lot of services there. Obviously that's not a causing factor, but it might be contributing to him not getting better, getting, you know, what he needs in order to thrive or at least function better. Yeah,
But I guess I was a little. Sticking by it.
good. I like that though.
You know, her death with this family.
Yeah.
I think there's still like. Him like.
Very.
You know, there's like. Well, it's like, well, Gilbert is still like generally looking after him and being a good brother. And like his mom like might not interact with like his content during or go out, but like she's still like caring for him. And
Yeah.
she's even for that. Their environments.
It's a good resiliency factor, right? There's definitely a lot of love in that family, even if they have some shortcomings, right? Which probably every family does, right? They definitely care about each other.
As
Yeah.
well as it doesn't have like services. Or
Yeah.
whatever. But it does have like, you know, everyone, so it's a little like more understanding.
Sure.
There's a more sense of like community.
Hmm.
Like, I don't think you could throw like a big party like that where like everyone in the town is excited to be the.
Sure. No, and those are great things to point out, right? When he climbs the water tower, like everyone is there, like for better or worse, they're all there, right? And there is a lot of like support and awareness from everyone. Such a small town. I couldn't live there, though they do have an ice cream shop. So it could be worse. And a burger barn, right? So it could be way worse. But yeah, it's a very small town, and which comes with advantages and disadvantages. I do think that creates a cool sense of community and understanding, but then limited resources too. Right? I love that you looked at it on both sides. I think that's great. How about what could we do to maybe help him out a little bit? Number 5. What'd you put for number 5? How could we maybe help him get a little better? Any thoughts on like, I won't say treatment, but like interventions for him? Yeah. Yeah.
Track the people or kids his age.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some sort of like special facility or like tool that would help branch up and practice socializing. And some sort of education at least.
Yeah.
Kind of just started.
Yeah, and I think it clearly, it seems like it's summer, right? So there's no mention of school, but I think like a formal schooling setting or education would help him a ton, right? Like that would give him that structure and be really helpful. What, anything else? Yeah.
Like I'm gonna do something that I don't think they should do. Like I don't think they should put him in like a house or whatever to these people because that like goes like by far. I think it's destructive thing.
Okay.
Like at least currently, there's like 11 candidate that like supports him
Yeah.
most of the time. Whereas in like the house, like a lot of times, like especially support like things about
Mhm.
and like and it's like so not only like so you get the bad parts of his family,
Mhm.
you surprised, but then you don't get the good parts and like actually loving you and like stuff like that. I think it could be helpful if they have like someone who came into the house.
Yeah. Like a behavioral aid or something like that.
Like,
Mhm.
as well as like
Yeah. That was actually my first psychology job, right? I was a therapeutic behavioral aid, where you go into people's houses and help them with behavioral issues with children are having. And I think that would be a great thing, having somebody come in rather than removing him. I think that I like that, right? That's a good idea of having somebody come in and help out rather than maybe pulling him from the house. And then some schooling stuff, a formal like setting. Anyone have anything else that might help? Yeah. 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 Yeah, I think that could be great for him, give him that structure and that independence and autonomy. Every time I watch this, I think I always think of my kids, right? And they're still pretty young, but like my little ones from kindergarten on, when they started school, we made a checklist for them. So when they wake up, there's this laminated sheet that's a checklist. It's right near our kitchen. And it says all the things that they need to do, right? And they can check it off with a whiteboard marker and then erase it and do it every day. And it creates this structure for them that like is really helpful. And I always think of that whenever we're talking about Arnie, because I think if he had a little more structure and like consistency, that would go a long way of like helping him to be more independent. Like they have to make their bed or try to make their bed and try to get dressed and pack their lunch. And, you know, we help them with each thing, but they have to go through and check them off. And I think having some structure and guidance like that could really help him. I think Arnie could learn to do a lot more if he had some of those resources, if he had some more help, if he had some more structure. Sometimes people mention like family therapy. Obviously it gets complicated in that the mom passes at the end, but you know, some family therapy to work on that family dynamic could be helpful. They clearly are moving at the end somewhere else, maybe a bigger town, which will have advantages and disadvantages. But I think he could really benefit from like a lot of different interventions that would help him to function at a higher level. Anyone have any other just kind of general thoughts or comments, anything else related to the movie at all before I collect these from you? Yeah.
Or just to like.
Yeah.
My aunt. By disorder. Right. And she like works in McDonald's.
Yeah.
And it's like really productive for her because even though like she only works like a 3 hours a week, she gets like interactive with other people.
Yeah.
She has like a sense of, oh, like I'm actually helping and stuff like that. As well as like she gets to say like me
Yeah.
on this time, which is like helpful for her. She has different spending. Yeah, which is good.
Yeah, that's huge, right? And I think that would give confidence and like that sense of like, again, autonomy of I can do things on my own. And a lot of companies have really branched out to try and hire people who are like on the spectrum or have developmental like delays of some sort. And I think that's fantastic. We went to Legoland not that long ago, and like the young man who like helped us get on like the Emmett ride was clearly on the spectrum. And I think it's amazing, right, that they would like hire somebody purposefully, you know, to like give that sense of agency. I think that could go a long way for him too. I would agree. Anyone, I always feel sad when Gilbert loses his temper, right, and smacks him around a little bit. I'm glad they showed that, right? If you have ever known someone or had someone in your life who has a developmental delay or disability, it's taxing, right? And it can be a lot of work. It's a lot of responsibility for two teenagers, basically, who are caring for him. Like his siblings are caring for him the vast majority of the time. And as sad as it is, I think it's important that they show the toll that could take and make Gilbert, I mean, he's human, right? He messes up and apologizes for it. And so I think that's an important thing to show, even though it's not the easiest thing to see. Yeah.
So this is similar like when someone like lady from their church, her daughter has like autism. One time I think she like took someone's weight off during service, and then her mom got mad at her and was like hitting her a little bit.
Right. And like it's obviously never okay, you know, to be like violent like that, but it happens, right? Unfortunately, you know, and when you're trying to be patient constantly, I mean, it is just a constant amount of care depending on where someone falls on the spectrum. It can be exhausting. And, you know, I'll obviously read your comments, but if you've known someone who has this, it can be very taxing. So I'm glad that they showed that, even if it is a little bit sad. And I know it's an older movie, but I think it makes for a good discussion. And a lot of your papers, a lot of your characters, movies blur things together there too. And you're having to do the same thing of like, well, this one fits better, but there's some stuff that might fit here too. The media loves to do that, loves to blend them together. I think they blend these two quite a bit, which makes for a good discussion of his character. All right. If you want to make sure your name is on those, and go ahead and pass them up. Come around and collect them. Right, do I have everyone? Okay. So we'll leave chapter 14 behind. Obviously, we didn't cover most of it, right? It was kind of like a flipped chapter. So if you didn't look over chapter 14 for the movie paper, make sure you go back and look over that a little bit more than maybe you normally would. Let me erase this. And then we'll move into chapter 15 here. It's about aging. And this chapter is actually relatively brief. There's only a couple of disorders in here. But we're going on the other end of the spectrum now. We went from childhood disorders. Now we'll be in disorders of aging. Not great, but it's pretty much done. All right. My grandma always used to say that she was really well seasoned, which is why I went with like the seasons and like fall, right? She lived to 102. So she was like, I'm exceedingly well seasoned at the end of her life. And I would agree. But I went with this idea of like kind of the fall representing older. But we'll look at a little bit, this realm that we call geropsychology. We'll look at some disorders that are common. Disorders of cognition is really the focus. So this is what we'll focus on here for the most part. And this is definitely something that you can specialize in. But geropsychology is the study or like the field of psychology that's concerned with the mental health of elderly people. And in our culture, in our society, we define elderly as over the age of 65, right? So people who are 65 and older, right? What we would define as elderly. And just like with childhood, old age brings unique upsets and special pressures and changes that occur. There's a lot of changes that happen as we get older. Sadly, it's kind of a sobering thing to realize, but about like our mid-20s or so, we actually start declining, right? Physically and mentally, we start a slow decline that we can often postpone and delay and kind of stop in some ways, depending on the choices that we make. But there are things that happen when we get older that are kind of unique to being older. And that's what we'll focus on in this chapter. And there's two main groups. And the first one we've been talking about also, there are disorders that are common among any age that people can also have when they're older. What we're more interested in is the second group, disorders of cognition, things like Alzheimer's and the different dementias. And that's what we'll focus on for the most part. But in group number one, if you suffered from depression or anxiety or any disorder when you were younger, that can obviously persist into your elderly years. People who are older can suffer from depression and anxiety and any of the disorders that we've covered, just as you can when you're younger, right? So there are disorders that are common among all ages that can also affect you when you're beyond the age of 65. Interestingly, and this is something that's gaining a lot of like research, there's a lot of substance abuse in elderly populations, specifically related to prescription medication, right? And this can come in a couple of different forms. Sometimes people who are older, because of memory issues, forget that they took their medication and they take it a second time or a third time, and that can cause some substance problems. Very common for people who take a lot of medications use these little like pill boxes. My mom will always do this. She'll be like, did I take my medication today? I'm like, I don't know, check your box. If it's in there, no. If it isn't, then hopefully you took it. These little boxes can be really helpful, right? If you're taking a lot of medication and trying to remember. The other way this might manifest is sometimes people who are older go from doctor to doctor to doctor seeking medication, right? Of trying to get pain medication or just different drugs that they're taking to get more of them, or thinking that you know better than the doctor. My mother-in-law's so bad at this. I always pick on her. I feel bad. She's such a sweet woman, but I pick on her all the time. But she always has this mentality of like, if one is good, three is better, right? Like if one Advil will do it, three will really do it, right? Like I know the doctor told me to take one, but I think two would be better. Right. And I'm like, well, yeah, he has a medical degree and you don't. So maybe listen, but she always has this cocktail. Like we were on Thanksgiving and she had a headache and she pulls out like 3 Motrin, 2 Advil, and then some other random blue pill. And she's like, this will work. And I'm like, you could just take 2 Advil. Like, what are you doing? And she's like, no, I have my own cocktail for whenever, my head hurts. Like, okay, and that's one way that substance abuse can kind of manifest. You see that a lot in older individuals. I know better. Like, okay, well, this will work for me. I know the doctor said X, but I'm going to do Y. Right. Or again, forgetting or maybe seeking lots of medication. There's a lot of prescription medication abuse in the elderly population. Obviously, any disorder, again, that you suffered with when you're younger can persist into late adulthood. What's more relevant for what we're focused on are the disorders of cognition. And these are unfortunately kind of disorders that relate to getting older. And as we age, we do start to have memory decline. This happens from a young age, and it can happen when you're tired, when you're stressed, when you're distracted. It becomes easy to forget stuff, right? And we all have small mishaps in memory. And as we get older, it gets more and more common, right? I hear the same stories, right? My grandparents would tell the same story over and over and over again. Like, grandpa, dude, you just told me that 3 minutes ago, right? Like, same stories. My parents, same stories, right? That's common, like kind of forgetting or repeating, forgetting where you put your keys, forgetting like a name. All those things are really common as you get older, right? Your brain and your memory ability declines a little bit. But some people experience really severe, extensive changes in memory and cognitive ability as they get older. And that's what we're more focused on kind of in this chapter. So what we can see, people can develop something called a delirium, or they can develop what are called neurocognitive disorders, which used to be called dementias. So just a little bit of a clarification here. If somebody's delirious or they have a delirium, it's typically what we call a rapid clouding of consciousness, right? They might have a hard time knowing where they are. They might not be able to have an orderly sequence of thought. They might hallucinate. It tends to be something that is a very, very fast onset, typically caused by things like infections or fevers. Somebody has surgery and they get an infection, and all of a sudden they're hallucinating. They don't know where they are. They're confused. They have a fever, right? And that can cause you to hallucinate or be confused. So something that comes on quickly with usually like a very biological, physical, medical reason. And if you can identify the reason, they're often easy or fast to correct or treat. So somebody is confused and like hallucinating and they don't know where they are and they have an infection, you give them an antibiotic. When the infection goes away, the delirium goes away, right? If they have a high fever and they're again having those symptoms of being like out of it and confused, right? And you treat the fever goes down, right? Then they're going to stop those symptoms and it goes away. So something that is a very quick onset, typically like a physical reason. And if you can identify it, we can treat it and reverse it. The neurocognitive disorders are incredibly slow. They have a very slow onset. So we could say this is like days or hours. And this is years. Things like Alzheimer's, which is the most common neurocognitive disorder, takes years to develop, right? It's very, very slow. And unfortunately, we could add here that this is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to correct or treat. As it stands right now, there are sadly no cures for most of the neurocognitive disorders. There are treatments that we can do to slow them down, but there's nothing that will cure them, right? And so these are very different categories. Like delirium, again, very quick, treatable, reversible. Neurocognitive disorders like the dementia is very slow, right? Progressive and difficult, if not impossible, to treat. And the most common, by far, as I mentioned a moment ago, of the neurocognitive disorders is Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's disease, named after Alois Alzheimer's, who was the first one to identify it back in like 1906 or something like that. It's a very common disease of aging. Sadly, and this is kind of a sobering statistic, it affects 1 in 10 people over the age of 65. 1 in 10. 50% of people or more, if after you're like 80s, right? When you're into your 80s, your likelihood of getting this is very high. It's a disorder of aging. And it's something that tends to last about 8 to 10 years on average. And unfortunately, it is fatal, right? There is no cure for Alzheimer's. And it's a very brutal disease. How many of you have known someone or do know someone who's had Alzheimer's? Quite a few of you. Any like stories or thoughts or comments at all? Yeah. Yeah.
He's like really good either. I think he like from the point he was diagnosed, he lived for like a long period, like 15 years or
Mhm.
something like that. With like a relatively
Level of functioning.
Yeah.
Mhm.
in happiness level, but like I remember like near the end or whatever, my parents came like because he lives in Canada, so I went up to see him once a year.
Sure.
And so my parents came and he was like, oh, they can always get a good wine. And so they brought grape juice and put it in like a cup and he was like swirling it around and smelling it because I guess that was such like a central thing when he was younger to like smell wine. And he could remember that my parents like had good taste in wine. He's like, oh yeah, this is the good stuff. And, like,
Said with a Canadian accent, right?
Yeah.
Right. I like that. That's sweet, right? And sometimes, trying to find the sweet moments is all you can do. My dad passed of Alzheimer's 4 or 5 years ago at this point. And toward the end, he would ask my mom, he'd look at my mom and he'd be like, did I ever get married? And she'd be like, yes, like to me, right? Like he'd ask her. And it was the sweetest thing, like every single time, like bless him, because like, this could have gone ugly, right? Like, but every time his face would light up and he'd be like, oh, hi, like, all right, cool. Like he would be so excited. Like every time he'd be like, did I ever get married? She'd be like, yeah. And he just would light up. Like, what are you doing later? Kind of look, right? Like it was always so sweet. It could have been like, oh, really? Like, but no, every time it was super sweet. Or he would be like, I can read a book over and over again and it's new every time. And he would like joke about it. Cause I mean, what else are you going to do at that point? Like, and he had a lot of depression about it, but he would try and find the light in it. So I love that, right? Trying to find the levity in it whenever you can. Anybody else? Any other like comment stories? 94.
Positive. Or shape thing that's on the side of the shoulder.
Yeah.
It was triggered a dementia onset for the dementia section of 91. She lives with us and she asked the same question for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
For me, it's I look for Crystal Barnes and done in the morning.
Sure.
But it's interesting. She still remembers a lot of things
Mhm.
in her life. She's pretty high functioning. She's pretty like healthy for 95.
Yeah.
So
95's up there, right? That's impressive.
She's a
Mhm.
So
Okay.
she's true.
Yeah. And it's hard the older you get. I mean,
Yeah.
memory loss is just common as we age, but the older you get, the more vulnerable you are to these things. But that doesn't mean you're doomed. I don't want to like paint like a negative picture. My partner's grandma passed like 3 or 4 months ago, 99 when she died. Like longevity runs in like our families, right? Hopefully we're that lucky, right? I don't want to live to 99. I think like 88 would be good. Like 99's up there, right? But she at 99 like was so like sharp and on it with everything. No memory loss. It was just like physical stuff that was causing her problems. And so it's not always that these things happen, but you're definitely more vulnerable the older that you get. Yeah.
My intro psychology class, my teacher said that a lot of the times people with Alzheimer's forget the names of the people they love the most because I guess they're stored in a different place. Apparently, is that something that?
Yeah. It's tricky. So what happens is that we'll start with like short-term memory loss, right? Like you get what's called like the tip of the tongue phenomenon. And we've all had that moment where you're like, oh, I can't remember the word, or I can't remember the thing, but it happens a lot. And so it's like short-term things of did I do this? What was I just doing? Asking the same question every few minutes, like you were saying. And then what happens is it progressively moves backward, right? And so, like almost sequentially in time, right? And so you forget the last 5 years, and then 10, and then 20, and then it gets to like long-term memory. So, the emotional connections to things, right, are stored in a different part of the brain, right? The amygdala, right, stores our emotional connections and memories. So it's hard because and I'm sure some of you have maybe experienced this, when people have Alzheimer's, they have pockets of lucidity, right? And so 1 minute they don't remember anything, and then next minute it's all there, and then it's gone again, right? And so it's tricky. We don't fully understand. It's related to these two things, these tangles and plaques. They interfere with the way that the brain communicates with itself, right? And our neurons communicate. And so, yeah, it causes, just a lot of loss, right, of memory. But then you do often forget the names of the people closest to you, even if you're spending a lot of time with. It can be difficult for not only that person, but also the people in their life. Right? Yeah. I have a little video that explains this, but I'll mention these two things and then I'll play it. So as I said, this is a disease of aging, right? And so everybody possesses neurofibrillary tangles and senile plaques, right? There are these beta amyloid deposits of protein that exist in our brain and in our body, these twisted protein fibers. But what happens is people who have this disease, there's more of them. They have an excessive amount of them. They cluster together and they interfere with the way that neurons communicate. And so it literally progresses through the brain in kind of a predictable pattern. People have stages that they go through. And then as they get toward the end of life, it almost interferes with your ability just to remember to breathe and do automatic functions. It's like your body just shuts down at the end. But it's these tangles and plaques that are thought to be the big culprit, along with some neurotransmitters like dopamine and acetylcholine and a few others. So there's a lot of very physical elements to this, but it's not necessarily genetic. The only time this is genetic is when somebody has early onset Alzheimer's. Early onset would be like in their 50s instead of after 60. After 65 is just a disorder of aging. But if they get it in their 50s, then you might be more vulnerable genetically. If you have children biologically, that might develop it. So we do see some genetic element, but only with early onset. So if people get it in their 60s, it's not necessarily going to be passed on. You're not more vulnerable as a child or a grandchild. But earlier than that, you can be. Yeah.
Remember, it wasn't that bad until she fell and she broke her hip.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, it was night and day. It was really weird, and I don't know what that could have been. I don't know if anyone.
Sure. But sometimes it's just that there's that tipping point, right? Same thing happened to my dad. My dad actually had something called Lewy body dementia, which is on the next slide. But what can happen is people suffer an injury, and it's just too much for the body to recover from. And the body and mind are so connected that it just kind of catapults them to the next stage. Sadly, that can happen, right? It's everything just kind of starts to shut down. So let me play this little overview for you, and we've been talking about it, but I think it does a good job of kind of showing the brain and the different stages that people go through. And again, 8 to 10 years is an average. Some people it's quite a bit more, and some people it can be less, right? And so what you see is small changes in cognition, and then it escalates to changes in personality, a lot of severe memory loss, and at the end, again, your brain starts to shut down. And ultimately kind of forgets how to function. And that tends to be what claims your life in the end. So unfortunately, this is something that's fatal, though an incredible amount of research is being done on this because it affects so many people. So hopefully, by the time that we get to, 65 and we're all in that range, hopefully we have better treatments or maybe even a cure. Nothing yet, but we're on our way. Yeah, there and then it could be an exacerbating factor. There's a lot of diet and lifestyle things that are related to Alzheimer's. It might not be that it causes it, but it can definitely make it happen quicker. And so poor diet, poor sleep, poor self-care in terms of physical health, and addiction and abusing substances might have a in that, because it's messing with your neurotransmitters, right, when you're using different substances. So the correlates of that are pretty high. Typically, you would have to have it kind of in place already, but it can easily kind of push it a little bit farther, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I know at some point it said, like later on, it was the ability to like regulate emotion.
Yeah.
Like with this disease, depression and stuff too.
Mm,
At some point later on, you like lose that ability to understand that it's sad.
yeah. Yeah, and there's the hard part with this disease is it's in the beginning stages, somebody's aware that they have it, right? And you know what the future is probably going to look like. So there tends to be a lot of anxiety and depression. And so it's often like at a peak early in the disease. And then in the middle, like of the progression of it, what happens is you start to have moments where you forget that you have it. And once you hit the point of not being aware enough of the world around you that you have it, depression and anxiety actually go way down because you aren't aware of it anymore. And so in the earlier stages or like the middle stages, people can really struggle with depression, suicidality, anxiety. You know, I used to be super capable and now I can't drive. You don't trust me with the money anymore, like because I don't have any memory of what I'm doing. But then at the end, when you lose the awareness that you're being impacted by it, all those things kind of fade away, which if there's one like kindness to this, it might be that. But then people have like those pockets of lucidity where it comes back and then they forget again. Really, really awful. My partner's grandpa lived, so grandma lived to 99, grandpa lived to 98, right? They passed within like 6 months of each other. It's too bad it wasn't 6 hours. They would have wanted to go that way, right? But it's 6 months. And the grandma passed first, and the grandpa had really bad dementia at 98. And like he'd constantly be like, where's my wife? Where's my wife? Where's my wife? And we'd have to keep telling him that she passed. And then he'd forget. And we'd have to tell him again. And he'd cry. And we had to like go through this like over and over and over again. And then he progressed enough that he didn't remember that she was around. And it was such a blessing at that point to not have to, you know, because you had this moment, do you want to be honest with him or not? Oh, she's in another room, you know, and like then he would forget. Like it was just so much easier. But when you hit that point, where you're no longer lucidly aware of the world around you, it tends to be a little easier, at least for that person. Maybe not the people around them, but the people in their life. There are other neurocognitive disorders, just to mention these. The main one is Alzheimer's. My dad actually had Lewy body dementia, and he lived with it for 16 years, so a long time. Very similar to Alzheimer's, but it's caused by these little bodies called Lewy bodies, named after the doctor who coined them. Very similar presentation, but it affects your movement. And so as you get a little bit more into the disease, you stop being able to walk, you start shuffling, which is very common. These two are also very movement related. Huntington's and Parkinson's have a lot of physical movement, tremor related symptoms. People with Parkinson's shake, right? They have like constant like shaking and tremors, makes it difficult to walk and move. Huntington's incredibly genetic. It's like 50% likelihood of genetically inheriting this. Also has a lot of movement-related things going with it. Vascular neurocognitive disorder, if people have dementia that comes from a stroke or a physical incident, we call it vascular neurocognitive disorder. So that might be like what your grandma has in a way, and that she has a tumor, right? That is then causing like a vascular strain. And so it might actually fall into that, right? Now, or it could be Alzheimer's, it's hard to say. But when people have like a stroke or a seizure, something that restricts blood flow, they can develop dementia-like symptoms, which can sometimes get a little bit better once they heal, or it can continue to progress. There's also a couple of other little ones. This one, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, exceedingly rare. It's the human equivalent of mad cow disease. Right, and it's caused by, it's usually in like very like third world countries, can be gotten from eating like contaminated meat. Very, very rare. But there are certain viruses and other types of neurocognitive disorders. These aren't as common, but there are other ones that can affect people just as prevalent, especially the last two. Parkinson's, Huntington's are pretty, unfortunately, are other ones that happen with a good degree of regularity. Right. Yeah.
Is there like a spectrum
Of these disorders, you mean, or? Yeah, not as much as with other things, right? Like when people have depression, they can have it on a spectrum of mild to severe. This tends to start mild, but it progresses to severe. And so you might be on the mild end of it because you're in the early stages. But unfortunately, all of these, they don't have cures, right? They have treatments. We'll talk about them next class, things that can slow them in the early stages. But it's more just which stage of it are you at, right? So you might be in like an early stage, which is less intense, but it's unfortunately going to progress, at least at this point. Any other thoughts or comments, questions, stories, anything else here? Yeah.
Most of the spectrum is more like kind of progression.
A progression.
You know, like,
Yeah.
kind of like defined by certain.
Yeah. And if you really were to tell in the beginning stages, like, is this normal memory loss or is it more? And so sometimes it's just a waiting game to see if it's going to progress or not. And again, it can be a long time coming. If you take good care of your brain and your body, you can really delay this quite a bit. Like if you're vulnerable to getting it, and there are some tests now that you can take, which aren't 100% accurate. So that's a whole nother, can of worms. But if you do those things to prevent it, it can be really helpful in delaying it quite a bit, right? If you take good care of yourself. So I'm going to stop here so I can talk about those two things that are on the board over there, just so I can make sure everyone is feeling okay about everything that we have coming up in the next like week and a half or so. And then we'll keep going with this on Thursday. But if I head over to Canvas here. So we are today's the 29th. Can you believe Thursday's December? That's wild. It's going so fast. Slow down. I'm not ready. My kids yesterday were like, you have less than a month till Christmas. I'm like, shh, don't say that to me right now. Gift cards for everybody, right? Forget it. I'm apparently quite behind, right? But if you're looking at our syllabus, one big thing that we have this week, the second part of the paper, or the final part of the paper is due this week. And it was originally due today, but I pushed it back to Thursday, as we talked about before. So if you click on modules on our Canvas site, you can find the paper instructions here. And then the assignment is all the way down at the bottom. And I'm sorry, this is so dim, the bulb is clearly dying. But all the way down here, here's diagnosis paper part 3. So I just want to take a minute to talk about this and see if you have any other questions. But the paper is worth 100 points. It's worth the same amount as a test. So please take some time on this, take it seriously, really put some effort into it. If you look at the instructions for part 3, I just want to highlight a few things. This should be 5 to 6 pages. Plus the title page and references page. Okay, so it's a decent length paper. So it's 5 to 6 pages plus these 2 very brief pages on either end. I will never take off for you giving me too much. So if you have like a 7-page paper, don't feel like you need to change the font to something really small or something. It's totally fine if it's over, but you don't want to be under that. If you're under that, I guarantee you didn't have enough like content or detail. So make sure it's at least 5 to 6 pages. And then there should be a title page and a references page on either end. I'll talk more about that in a second. If you're like, I don't know what that means, right? That's okay. The content of your paper, I gave you kind of a rough outline here. This is the way that people tend to approach this. They give me a little bit of a summary, right? Don't make this be super long. It shouldn't be pages, but a few paragraphs. Kind of give me a brief summary of the show or the movie. A description of the character, right? So maybe a paragraph or so describing your character, right? This is the person I'm looking at. This is their age, their demographics, kind of paint a little bit of a picture of them. Then you should spend the bulk of your paper diagnosing your character. So you're going to pick up a disorder or maybe 2, and you're going to highlight all of the diagnostic criteria that they need to meet in order to have that disorder. That's really the biggest part of your paper, right? Make sure that you cover every criteria. You might get that from the DSM or from whatever book or article you're using. And then you're going to give specific examples from your show to support your diagnosis. So let's say that you choose depression, right? And then like I played that clip of Bella for you as like an example of her having symptoms of depression. Right? So you would describe the symptoms and then give me examples from the show to support. And that should be the biggest part of your paper. That should take up a couple of pages in the middle of your paper. Yeah.
Could we like, let's say we found a YouTube video. We like describe that, but then also sum it.
You can include, don't put it in the paper, but if you want to include it like in your submission on Canvas, you could. Basically, you're just describing that scene. But if you wanted to share the clip, you're welcome to put it like after the paper, at the end of the paper or something like that. You're welcome to. You don't need to, but you're welcome to if you'd like. Yeah. Just one, and I'll talk about that in a second, right? Just so the biggest part of your paper is this, right? And that's where people tend to lose points, is just not covering all the criteria, not giving me enough examples and so on. You're going to talk a little bit about causes and treatment, and then any kind of like closing remarks that you might have at the end, right? And it should be, again, about 5 to 6 pages. And then I'm asking you to do a couple of things with APA format. Now, this class isn't about APA formatting. I do teach research methods in the spring online, and that one is all about like APA and formatting and so on. The 2 things that I want you to do, I want you to have a title page, and I want you to have a references page. Now, when I open your paper, the first thing that I should see is the title page. If there's no title page, I know you didn't even try APA. Okay? If your references page says works cited or bibliography instead of references, again, I'll know you didn't try APA. And I'm going to show you some resources on here in a minute where you can see how to do that very easily. And then on your references page, you should have one academic source. And again, every single one of you could use the DSM if you wanted. This is that source that you gave me in part 2 of your paper. And then your show. You're welcome to have more than that, but that's the minimum of what you need. One academic source and your show on your references page. Okay, and then again, you know, that's the first thing I'm going to look for when I open your paper. Do you have a title page and a references page? So the APA formatting is worth 10 points. There's some general stuff like it should be double spaced and things like that. But the big thing, I'm just going to look to see that you've tried these things. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just want you to try them as like an exposure to APA. So if you go back, I just want to show you where you can find some of those resources. All the way up on modules here. Modules. So here's the paper instructions. Underneath it, there's some resources that are going to be really helpful for you. I gave you 5 sample papers. These are people who turned in, these are student papers from the past that all got A's. So let's open Hook. So if you're like, I don't know what a title page looks like, here was their title page, which is done correctly. And then you can see kind of how they formatted their paper. If you're like, I don't quite know how to organize this, look at some of the samples. They're going to help you out quite a bit. And then you can see their paper. And then at the end, there's a references page with their show and then a source, right? And so these sample papers might be really helpful for you in kind of seeing how other people did it. I would definitely recommend looking at them. There's a handout from the Writing Center that will show you how to do a title page and how to do a references page. There's also their PowerPoint slides, which will show you the same. And if you scroll down, I shared this with you before, but here I have a video here from the library, and this is about resources. But if you scroll down, here's the presentation on APA formatting. She'll show you step by step how to do each one of those things. And that might be really helpful for you if you're feeling overwhelmed. Okay, so make sure you use those resources between the videos right here and then these things that are up here, the Writing Center handout and stuff. They'll show you how to do a title page and how to do a references page. So I just want you to try those. And again, that will be the first thing that I look at. Make sure that you have your sources on there. That'll be something else that I look at very quickly at the beginning. But this is, again, worth 100 points. Spend some time on it. Make sure that you really hit that length requirement, that you're covering the criteria and so on. Are there any other questions about the paper for now? Anything else? I'll remind you one more time on Thursday, but it's due by Thursday night at 11:59 p.m. And then our plan from here, so on Thursday, we'll finish up chapter 15, and then we'll start our last chapter. I'll say last like way too many times, probably, as we get into that. But we'll start forensic psychology. And then next week on Thursday is our last class session, and it's online. So I will see you today and Thursday and then Tuesday. Is agreed, data completed, just like the other ones. And that will be our last class. So we're not going to meet in a mandatory way during finals week. But if you want to come, I will be here during our final time. If you want to come meet with me and talk about your grade or just, go over anything, I will be here, but it won't be required. So that will be our plan. That will be our last class. That's next week, right? Anyone else feel sad? That makes me sad, right? I mean, I'm excited for winter break, but that makes me sad. So make sure, and on here, here's the study guide, right? So exam number 3 is the final. It's not cumulative. It's just a third test. So it's on everything since exam number 2. Okay, so you don't need to study all the stuff from the past. You're welcome, right? Just the stuff from right now. So just anything on here will be on exam number 3. Any questions about any of that? Anything about I just want to make sure, and I'll probably remind you every day from here on out, but I don't want anyone to miss anything or be confused. So again, I got your Gilbert grade sheets. We'll have 2 more participations left. It's a great time. As one last side note, check your grade on Canvas. If anything looks wrong, this is a good time to tell me, rather than after we've done final grades. Then it's a pain to change it. But if you're missing something or a score doesn't seem right or something is off, please let me know now. If you never turned in part 2 or 1 of the paper, you can still turn them in for half points. That's better than nothing. So now is a good time to kind of check your grade, go over all that. Let me know if there's anything wrong. Work on that paper. If you have questions, I'll hang out for a few minutes since we're kind of done a couple minutes early. If you have any questions, I'll hang out. Otherwise, I'll see you Thursday and we'll keep going with our chapter on aging.